Hi friends, it's Katya. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through 25 of my most anticipated releases for 2025. I wanted to do 25 books just theming wise for the sake of a pithy title, but there are so many exciting new release books this year that I definitely could have gone on for even longer. And I'm so excited not only to read these books, but also for other people to read these books so that I can in turn read/watch their reviews. I mean, that is why I'm on like the bookish social internet at all, because I really enjoy seeing other people talk about books. So if you guys are excited about any of these as well, I would love to know. But I'm going to go in chronological order according to release date. A couple of the January ones will have already been out by the time you guys will see this video, but it is a whole span of many different genres on this list to chat about today. We've got historical fiction, contemporary fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, and we're going to start off with a romance. Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams is the third book in her When in Rome series. Each of these books are set in Rome, Kentucky, and they follow one of the Walker siblings. So we followed Noah in the first book, Annie in the second book, and now in this third book we're following Emily. This series is very small town, cozy, happy, fluffy romance vibes. Noah was a bakery slash pie shop owner, Annie was a flower shop owner, and we're continuing these very like cutesy, idyllic job vibes with Emily, the second grade elementary school teacher. Now this is actually a rivals to lovers romance following two rival second grade teachers, which I think is really fun. First two books in this series were so wholesome but also so addicting to read. Sarah Adams has this way of really writing believable, strong connections between the characters and of writing physical attraction in a way that I think is tricky when it comes to a closed door romance. The books in the series so far have really not been particularly explicit, but they'll still make my heart flutter with just like a kiss or hands brushing, and I think that takes a lot of talent to write. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book very soon. Another romance out in January. This is actually a fantasy romance. Sometimes there's a little bit more emphasis on one of those than the other. This is Onyx Storm, the third book in the Empyrean series. The first book, you might have heard of it, it was kind of popular. Fourth Wing follows a girl named Violet who enters the school where they are training to ride dragons and be in the military, and there's a bit of an enemies to lovers romance happening as well. I thought the first book was fun. The second book I had a much lower opinion of. It was one of those books that just felt kind of meandering and made me wonder multiple times like, what is the point of all of this? And then there was kind of a kooky, crazy ending. I'm not gonna lie. It made me interested enough, even though I didn't enjoy most of the second book, to want to continue the series. I also buddy read the first two books with one of my very good friends, and it was so much fun to talk about them, whether we were enjoying it or whether we were making fun of it. So Onyx Storm is still one that I'm definitely anticipating as well. Now for the first nonfiction, Bibliophobia is a memoir, and it follows the author's exploration of her life, which she compares to different famous works of literature. So by diving into texts like Anne of Green Gables, Possession, A Tale for the Time Being, the author interrogates her cultural identity, her relationship with depression, and the intoxicating, sometimes painful ways books push back on those who love them. I think it's interesting that in this story, it seems like the memoir is about the author kind of discussing the ways that books have improved her life and also had like a negative effect on her, which I think is not something that is often discussed. I think people talk all the time about books that they love or books that changed them for the better, but people rarely talk about books that kind of challenge them and the question of whether reading is like inherently good. The description says that the author believes books can annihilate, reveal, and provoke you. Anyone incurably obsessed with books understands this kind of unsettling literary encounter. Exploring those themes, especially as somebody who reads a lot and has always defined myself as a reader, could be really, really fascinating. So that is Bibliophobia. Blob by Maggie Sue is a speculative, kind of weird book about this woman who finds a blob behind a dumpster. She takes it home and she feeds it and cares for it, and then she realizes that it obeys her commands, and she ends up being able to like grow it and mold it into her ideal romantic partner. The description says that she feeds it sugary cereal and a stream of pop culture, and soon the creature transforms into a movie star handsome white man. But as our main character's desire to be loved unconditionally threatens to spiral out of control, she's forced to confront her lonely childhood and the racial marginalization that has defined her relationships. Ultimately, this is a book of self-discovery and learning that it's impossible to control those those that you love. This description sounds weird and darkly funny and reflective, which makes it something that I think I will really enjoy. Deep End by Ali Hazelwood is the newest Ali Hazelwood book coming out. This is a swimming focused sports romance following a competitive diver and a swimmer. This follows two people who are both training for the Olympics. They're both very obviously competitive and focused, but there is a well-guarded secret that slips out and everything about their relationship changes and they begin an arrangement. As the pressure leading to the Olympics heats up, so does their relationship. It was supposed to be temporary, but their hearts might be treading into dangerous waters. I'm getting the impression that this is a little bit of like a friends with benefits story, although Ali Hazelwood just wrote something similar to that with Not in Love, so I don't really know entirely what to expect from this, but I really like Ali Hazelwood. I will try reading at least basically anything that she writes, so I am absolutely going to keep an eye out for this one. First Time Caller by BK Borison. I'm sorry, I feel like there's a lot of romance at the front end of this chronological like release date stuff, but all of the stuff at the beginning of the year that I personally am interested in happens to be romance. I promise as we get deeper into the list and further along in the months, there will be a little bit more variety of genres, but here is yet another romance. First Time Caller follows a hopeless romantic and a jaded radio host in this cozy Sleepless in Seattle inspired love story. We followed the host of a radio show. It's actually the Baltimore Romance Hotline. His name is Aiden and he has fallen out of love with Blob, but when a young girl calls into the station asking for dating advice for her mom, the interview goes viral and both Aiden and the mother in question, Lucy, are thrust into the limelight. This sounds exactly like Sleepless in Seattle, which is one of my top movies. It's in my top 4 on Letterboxd, if that tells you anything. And I've never read a book that was inspired by Sleepless in Seattle. I'm hoping that this will give me similar cozy vibes, but it's always tricky when there is such a close comparison to two things because it puts more pressure on this to live up to Sleepless in Seattle and the genius that is Nora Ephron. But it's definitely one that I will be interested in picking up sooner rather than later. Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill is a cozy fantasy following our main character, Jenny Greenteeth. She is a lake-dwelling monster who has never spoken to a human before until a witch is thrown into her lake and she decides to save her. This book is blurbed by T. Kingfisher, who wrote one of my favorite books of last year and is just generally an author that I really love. They said that this book is a charmingly monstrous debut, which is definitely something that appeals to me. I don't always read a ton of cozy fantasy, but when I do, I tend to really enjoy it. These next two are my most highly anticipated books of the year. They happen to both come out on the same day and they're both very different. First is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I've said this before, though I don't know how recently. The Hunger Games is my favorite series of all time. I've read the original trilogy so many times, particularly Catching Fire. I could reread that every single year and not get tired of it. My rereads are definitely in the double digits, though I have admittedly lost count of how many times I have read it. So the fact that we're getting a haymitch focused prequel is so shocking to me. This is a day that I never thought would come, and I am very optimistic about it. I love not only the action that Suzanne Collins can write and the way that her writing just really grips you, but also her complex, vibrant characters and the social commentary and political allegory that she's able to weave into the background of all of her books. I love Suzanne Collins, and I will be in the bookstore, credit card in hand, ready on March 18th to pick up this book. I will also be so excited on March 18th to pick up nonfiction John Green book, Everything is Tuberculosis. This is a book about, you guessed it, tuberculosis, which is typically not something that I would go out of my way to read, but I love John Green. I love his writing, both his fiction and his nonfiction. His Anthropocene reviewed collection of essays, which you can maybe see on the shelf, fits somewhere behind me. I know that the way John Green writes will entertain me and fascinate me, and I will probably learn a lot from reading this book, so I'm excited to read Everything is Tuberculosis. Next is Say You'll Remember Me, which is the newest Abby Jimenez romance. Abby Jimenez is an author that I've really loved in the past. Yours Truly is probably my personal favorite of hers, but I also really enjoyed Just for the Summer and Part of Your World. This book seems to be separate than her previous work, so it's not like a companion novel or anything like that, and the description seems admittedly kind of vague. We follow our main character Samantha. She goes on a first date with this man named Xavier, who is a gorgeous veterinarian, and everything is seemingly perfect. He is seemingly perfect until, after one incredibly and seemingly endless date, Samantha is forced to admit the truth, that her family is in crisis and a relationship would be impossible. so she begs him to forget her. However, no amount of distance or time is nearly enough to forget that something between them. I don't think that on its own that description really would have convinced me to read that book. You're telling me that they go on a good date and then they decide not to see each other again, and then they see each other again. I'm not really intrigued, but I trust Abby Jimenez, so I will be trying this book. Enchantra by Keely Smith is the sequel to Phantasma. This is a romantasy following our main character Genevieve. Genevieve has been invited to Italy by a mysterious friend of her mother's, but when she arrives there, she finds herself trapped in this cursed, insidious game of hide and seek within the home of her host family. There are multiple contestants within this game, including the tall, dark, and handsome and exceptionally rude Rowan, and the two of them form an alliance under the guise of a fake courtship. So we've got a fake dating romantasy happening, which fake dating is probably my favorite romance trope. It's really up there. Fake dating and rivals to lovers are probably the best to me. So this is something that really appeals to me, and I had such a fun time with the first book in this series. The creepy, paranormal, fantastical vibes were something that I really enjoyed, and something that I know I will continue to enjoy in this next book. Now for I'm laughing just thinking about this book. This is a weird one. This is Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. We follow Linda, who is obsessed with planes. She works a normal 9-to-5 day job, but on the last Friday of every month, she indulges in her true passion, taking a round-trip flight to a regional hub. The destination is irrelevant because each trip means a new date with a handsome stranger, a stranger whose intelligent windscreens, sleek fuselages, and powerful engines could make Linda feel a way that no human ever could. She knows that she can't tell anyone that she's sexually obsessed with planes, nor can she reveal her belief her destiny is to marry one of these planes by dying in a plane crash, thereby uniting her with her soulmate plane for eternity. As the carefully balanced elements of Linda's life begin to spin out of control, she must choose between maintaining the trappings of normalcy and launching herself headlong toward the love she's always dreamed of. This is a premise that admittedly seems pretty messed up, but I get the impression that it's going to be weird and sad and funny. Reading through some of the reviews of people who have already read it, they say that it's audaciously imagined, surprisingly tender, twisted and beautiful, weird and sad and funny, simultaneously one of the best and most bizarre things they've ever read. This review says that it's so much more than its premise, and there was something really addictive about it. So on top of the really engaging and unique premise, I think all of those reviews really make me anxious to try this book for myself. April 22nd marks Emily Henry's newest book. Like the Abby Jimenez book, the description of Great Big Beautiful Life does not necessarily grab me, but I mean, I've trusted Emily Henry so much in the past. She's written one of my favorite books ever, People We Meet on Vacation. Funny Story was a 5-star favorite book of last year, and she is just consistently an auto-buy author for me, so Great Big Beautiful Life will be no different. I think the reason that I'm not as excited about this one is that it follows two writers, and writers in books are not my favorite topic to read about. In this book, Alice and Hayden are both given an opportunity to write a memoir for this famous woman named Margaret, but they're both in a trial period, so they're given different information about this woman's life, and they're both supposed to write their books, and Margaret will decide which one she likes better. Emily Henry has said that this book is different from anything that she's written before. I will be fascinated to learn whether that is in terms of genre, because it does seem, at least from reading about it, that it is still romance, or if that's in terms of theme, or if that's in terms of something else about the story. So definitely one that I will be reading, and I hope that it is another M-Hen 5-star hit. Silverborn by Jessica Townsend is the most recent book in the Morrigan Crow series, which is one of my favorite book series. I do think I will have to go back and reread the first 3 books in order to catch up for this one, because it's been a couple years since the last release. But this is a middle grade fantasy series that is cozy and adventurous and gives me warm, fuzzy, sparkly feelings. We follow Morrigan Crow, and in the first book it is believed that she is cursed and that she's going to die before she turns 13, but she is rescued and whisked away to a magical world where she much more belongs. These books follow Morrigan Crow and a large cast of really lovable characters. I love how immersive this fantasy world is, and also how gripping the mystery that has been threaded through all the books is. I adored book number 3, and it had a very exciting ending, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but definitely one that left me clamoring for the next book, and then I had to wait 2 years. So I will definitely be reading Silverborn as soon as I can get my hands on it, and I highly recommend this series if you like middle grade fantasy, or really if you like any cozy adventurous fantasy, and I particularly recommend the audiobooks. Can't Get Enough by Kennedy Ryan follows Hendrix. This is the 3rd book in in Kennedy Ryan's Skyland series. In this book, Hendrix is a very ambitious and successful career woman. She has goals, dreams, and ambitions, and she's always striving upwards, but now she's facing a very tough challenge in having to care for an aging parent in her life who has time for romance. In her experience, she hasn't met a man who can keep up with her anyway until Maverick Bell becomes the first man to make her feel seen and desired and appreciated. But for some reason, he is off limits. It doesn't really say from the description why their romance is forbidden, but this is a deeply moving and personal novel about sacrifice, self-reliance, and finding true happiness, which seems in line with other Kennedy Ryan books I've read. They're always emotional and deeply romantic, and if this book is anything like the first two in the series, I think I will really enjoy it. Next is My Friends by Frederick Backman. I love this author. Anxious People and Beartown are two of my favorite books I've ever read. I have high hopes for this book, but I'll be completely honest, I have not read the description, and I would really like to go into it not knowing anything. I know it's contemporary fiction. I assume it's about friendship and ties and relationships between people, which is one of my favorite things that Frederick Backman writes about. I think the way that he can write not only like friendships between people, but the ways that people can be unexpectedly connected is, oh, it's so beautiful. And I really think that I could have another 5-star read in this story, even not knowing really what I'm getting into. The Knight and the Moth is a dark fantasy following Sybil, who traded a decade of service for a home in the great cathedral. She is a diviner, and from her dreams and visions, she can predict terrible things before they occur. One day, a knight arrives at the cathedral, and his future is the only future that Sybil cannot see. He doesn't really have respect for Sybil's visions, but she is forced to team up with him and leave the safety of her cloister when other diviners start mysteriously disappearing. I know other people are excited for this book because she wrote another very popular series, One Dark Window. I have not read those books. I would like to eventually, but I think I was interested in this one because of the like religious imagery, being in a cathedral, of being cloistered. I just enjoy reading that atmosphere. I think the dark, mysterious vibes will be really fun. This book is coming out in the spring, but it might be one that I save for the fall. Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid is about the 1980s space shuttle program. We follow Joan, a professor of physics and astronomy who has been obsessed with the stars for as long as she can remember, and she finds an opportunity to apply for NASA's space shuttle program. She meets other astronauts, they become unlikely friends, they prepare for their first flights, and she finds a passion and a love she never imagined. Like many Taylor Jenkins Reid books, I'm sure that this will really deeply explore characters and be uplifting, but it does say that in December of 1984, everything changes in an instant. Apparently they're on a mission, and I can only assume that some kind of tragedy strikes. Based on my very limited knowledge of space travel in the 1980s, I am wondering if something kind of Krista McAuliffe inspired, like Challenger inspired, will be influencing either the events or the themes of this book. This next book has the shortest description of any that I've found so far on Goodreads. This is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. 3 young women, their bodies planted in the same soil, their stories tangling like roots. One grows high, one grows deep, and one grows wild. All of them grow teeth. That is just so spooky and delightful. We're in 3 very different time periods, 1532, 1837, and 2019, but the characters' stories all combine in some way. This isn't explicitly in the description, so I don't remember where I saw this, but I'm almost positive there are vampires involved in this book, and I love vampires, so definitely very, very excited for this one. Now we have 2 books that I admittedly don't know that much about, beyond the fact that they are both Dramione fan fictions that are being traditionally published. The first is Rose in Chains, which as a fan fiction was called The Auction. This is by Julie Soto, who's an author who I have really enjoyed. I loved Forget Me Not, which is a contemporary romance, so I'll be interested to see Julie Soto's foray into romantasy. And the other is The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy, which is based on Draco Malfoy and the horrifying ordeal of being in love. I hope I got that title right. Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher is another book that I am very, very highly anticipating. This is a Snow White retelling, which Thank you, T. Kingfisher. That is exactly what I need and want and desire in my life. T. Kingfisher's Sleeping Beauty retelling, Thornhedge, was one of my favorite books of last year. Maybe it's because growing up I was very pale and had a short black bob, so I felt a kinship to Walt Disney's Snow White. It's a story that I just really love, and I feel like it's a fairy tale that is not retold quite as often as some others in books. Instead of following Snow White, we follow a healer named Anya. She knows little of politics but much about poisons, and when she's summoned to treat a mysterious illness afflicting the Princess Snow, she discovers a strange alternate world inside a magic mirror. This sounds so dark and fun, and I'm so excited to read it. In R.F. Kuang's Catabasis, we follow two academic rivals in the field of magic who have to go to hell to rescue their professor. It says it's Dante's Inferno meets Piranesi, and it's a dark academia fantasy, which I'm sure will be exciting and thought-provoking in the way that R.F. Kuang's books have been for me in the past. Last but not least, we have The Poisoned King. This is the sequel to Impossible Creatures, which is a middle grade fantasy that I read at the very end of last year and really adored. That first book follows Christopher, who is a young boy who finds out that his family are the protectors of this magical world called the Archipelago, and he is transported to this magical world, although the magic there is failing, and he has to go on a quest to figure out why it's fading and try to stop it and save magic. And along the way he meets lots of different magical creatures. I particularly liked in this book that a lot of the magical creatures were creatures that I am not typically used to see. There are dragons, but they're tiny dragons. We talk about griffins and kraken and sphinx, and I just felt so transported to this world. I thought the ending was really unexpected, and I'm very much looking forward to reading the sequel. Those are my 25-ish most anticipated releases for 2025. I'll link them down below in like a Goodreads shelf as well if you want to look, if I see anything else that catches my eye. But I would love to know from you which books you're anticipating most reading this year. It seems like it's going to be a really exciting year for book releases, and I hope that some of these are 5 stars. But thank you so much for watching this video and hanging out with me and spending some time together. I really appreciate you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified of the next time I post a video. Next week I'm going to be going through my entire physical TBR, so I will see you in that next video.